Hello, dear listeners. Today's episode is on Gertrude Stein's Three Lives. This episode is kind of in our tradition of our modernist spring madness episodes where, due to life circumstances, weather changes, political events, personal life stuff, the conversation gets a little out of control. But I feel like we still do a great job talking about Gertrude Stein. I put a lot of work into researching this episode because Stein is a fascinating character and her prose style is quite impactful and strange and hard to get a handle on, even if, as we talk about in this episode, it sort of is at odds with the content of the book, which attempts to kind of talk about working class women and women of different races than Gertrude Stein. And it ends up sort of dealing in sort of like, racist stereotypes, we might say, as we get into. So it's quite an interesting book, quite an interesting episode. And so if you're a little bit loony like we are with the sort of spring season, I think you'll find a lot to like in this episode. So yeah, as always, we hope you enjoy the conversation. I was, as they say in Inherent Vice, change your hair, change your life. So,
it's true. I don't know. I mean, technically nothing new has happened in my life since I grew. I've just only been like 2 weeks, but God. We don't have to waste a bunch of time on it, but I don't know how you're feeling about life in the world at the moment, but 2026, real stinker. PU.
I don't know, John, I'm fully Joker pilled at this point when they were like, actually, we're blocking Iran. We're blocking you. Infinity times infinity. I literally just went, yeah. So like I was like I'm like, this is normal to me. Whatever is happening.
It's so funny because it's just like, wow. So now you're taking a responsibility for nothing getting through the street. Like, again, not to whine, but I feel like literally everything in like both macro and micro is just like conspiring against me personally. Like, literally, like, the war in Iran and me getting dumped happened in, like, the same week. And then that also coincides with, like, the 6, like, worst weeks of work I've had, like, in 2 years.
To quote the epigraph to Three Lives, John, therefore I am unhappy, and it is neither my fault nor that of my life.
You know what? Yes.
Yeah. I think it's so fun. There's in my edition, there's no English translation of that, so I had to look it up. But I was like, I read that, I was like, huh, interesting. So,
man, they used to just write different back then.
Yeah, but
I have a question for you. So I read the Project Gutenberg edition.
Yeah,
and one thing I noticed, and I'm curious if this is like an error in like the Project Gutenberg version, because it is like a free PDF on like a free website. The word German is never capitalized.
Mine was also not capitalized.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, I don't know why. Maybe this is like, I had to keep reminding myself that this book came out in 1909 because there were times when I was like, wow, what year did this come out in? And then I was like, oh wait, it's 1909.
Yeah, they hadn't even invented jazz yet.
Yeah, they hadn't even invented jazz, and Gertrude Stein was writing about African Americans, which it appears she doesn't know much about. But yeah,
I don't even know if they had ragtime yet.
It's like we'll probably talk about this in the episode, but it's so great that Gertrude Stein is like, you know what? I'm gonna write like a social realist novel. I'm gonna write realism, and then she wrote this. There's like really like an incredible like. Actually, I'm really good at this other thing. I'm not gonna write realistic novels about people of the lower class and races of which I am not a member of. So. I'm going to talk about social issues. It's like, yeah.
We're good. We're good, Gertrude.
Yeah. I think Gass even says it was dated even at the time of its release.
I mean, that's like kind of what it like again, like you said, like, when was this written?
Yeah.
What year is it?
Yeah. But there are parts where like one character is just talking where I was like, what year is it? Like it felt way modern to me. And then the parts where like suddenly she says something kind of like racist and stereotypical about black people, I was like, oh, right. It's that year. Like,
it's 1909.
Although I have a great Richard Wright quote about Gertrude Stein I want to lay on you later, which we'll wait, I guess, until we start. But
yeah, I like that Gertrude's to get the flippancy out of the way. I like that Gertrude Stein wrote a social realist series of 3 novellas, most of which are about situationships.
Yeah, I mean, they're really all about situationships. Yeah, like even poor Lena at the end is kind of about that.
Oh no, that one definitely. I feel like Good Anna's the one that's like least about a situationship.
Well, but then the narrator is like, remember, Matilda was
the great romance of her life.
Yeah, I like how insistent the narrator is about that fact. Like, unless you forgot, like so.
But like like again, maybe this is kind of again like a what year is it thing. But like, what does she mean by romance in that? Like, is that romance in the contemporary sense of like a love story, or is that romance in like this is the great adventure of her life?
I mean, that's a good question because like the strength of the female relationships in these stories definitely like shed light on Gertrude Stein being, you know, like married to a woman at the time, or maybe she hadn't met Toklas yet, but she was about to. And so like there's something there in terms of the way they're presented and how strong they're depicted strongly. But at the same time, you could be right that like it could just be like a great adventure as opposed to like actual romance. But
well, as we talked about in, you know, our oh my god, Nightwood episode, you know, they were inventing lesbianism around this time.
Yeah, because remember, Juna Barnes was like, I'm not a lesbian, I just love that the one person I wrote that book about. Like,
I just love one particular hot sliz.
Okay, all right. I need to read you. This is for some local color. This is Hemingway describing the sex lesson that Gertrude Stein gave him. For some background information, we should note that Gertrude Stein's Paris apartment that she shared with Alice Toklas was like a hub of post-war expat European writers and artists. Picasso, Hemingway, Joyce, Pound, lots of other people. But Hemingway in A Movable Feast writes some of the funniest stuff I have read, where Hemingway, I think, is just sort of presenting his, I think quite honestly, what he thought at the time. And this is how I imagine the relationship. So on this day, Miss Stein was instructing me about sex. By that time, we liked each other very much, and I had already learned that everything I did not understand probably had something to it. Miss Stein thought that I was too uneducated about sex, and I must admit that I had certain prejudices against homosexuality since I knew its more primitive aspects. I knew it was only why you carried a knife and would use it when you were in the company of tramps when you were a boy, in the days when wolves was not a slang term for a man obsessed by the pursuit of women. I knew many inapproachable terms and phrases from Kansas City days and the moors of different parts of that city, Chicago and the lake boats. Under questioning, I tried to tell Miss Stein that when you were a boy and moved in the company of men, you had to be prepared to kill a man, know how to do it, and really know that you would do it in order not to be interfered with. That term was approachable. If you knew you would kill, other people sent it very quickly and you were let alone, but there were certain situations you could not allow yourself to be forced into or trapped into. Yes, Hemingway, she said, but you were living in a milieu of criminals and perverts. I did not want to argue that, although I thought that I had lived in a world as it was, and there were all kinds of people in it, and I tried to understand them, although some of them I could not like, and some of them I still hated. But what about the old man with beautiful manners and a great name who came to the hospital in Italy and brought me a bottle of Marsala or Campari and behaved perfectly, and that one day I would have to tell the nurse never to let that man into the room again? I asked. Those people are sick and cannot help themselves, and you should pity them. Should I pity so-and-so? I asked. I gave his name, but he delights so in giving it himself that I feel there is no need to give it for him. No, he's vicious. He's a corrupter, and he's truly vicious. But he's supposed to be a good writer. He's not, she said. He's just a showman, and he corrupts for the pleasure of corruption, and he leads people into other vicious practices as well. Drugs, for example. And then this goes on for a little bit, and then Gertrude Stein says, you know nothing about any of this, really, Hemingway. She said, you've met known criminals and sick people and vicious people. The main thing is that act males homosexuals commit is ugly and repugnant, and afterwards they are disgusted with themselves. They drink and take drugs to palliate this, but they are disgusted with the act, and they're always changing partners and cannot be really happy. I see. In women, it is the opposite. They do nothing that they are disgusted by and nothing that is repulsive. And afterwards, they are happy and they can lead happy lives together. I see.
I like that Gertrude Stein talks about gay men the way that gay men talk about women.
Well, also, you can tell that she's like, this guy doesn't know what a lesbian is, and I'm going to make sure that it's depicted positively, but not like his experiences where like he had to like was guard himself against tramps, like basically.
Yeah, yeah, just Hemingway, this oaf. Just
There's also a great bit where they describe how if you're going to go see Gertrude Stein, he took his wife, and Hemingway and Gertrude Stein talk about art while his wife and Toklas talk to each other. And at one point, Hemingway goes, Gertrude Stein seems like she's making up a lot of stuff. And his wife goes, she never talks to me. I just talk to Toklas. Really? So, yeah, like you said, some interesting views about we could say the queer identity, which they were probably inventing at the time. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely read Gentilina's husband as a little light in the loafers as well.
Well, yeah, and then he's just perfectly fine being a bachelor at the end.
Prefers it even.
Yeah, you're right. So there's also a way. I need to read you just one other thing from Movable Feast, and then we'll stop reading Hemingway. But some of the stuff about Gertrude Stein is incredible. She was angry at Ezra Pound because he had sat down too quickly on a small, fragile, and doubtless uncomfortable chair. That it is quite possible he had been given on purpose and had either cracked or broken it. That he was a great poet and a gentle and generous man and could have accommodated himself in a normal sized chair was not considered. The reasons for her dislike of Ezra, skillfully and maliciously put, were invented years later. Yeah, just imagine giving Ezra Pound a chair so that he would break it, so that you could get mad at him because you feel like you're in competition with him. I don't know.
Man,
yeah.
What a time to be alive.
Yeah, it's post-war. You're in Europe. You're expat. You're hanging out with this interesting woman and her partner. They have paintings by Cézanne in their living room, and she meanwhile is constantly telling you that you need to write better and that you're not writing well enough. So
I mean, I genuinely think that if I obviously going back in time to any degree is almost always a fool's errand.
Yeah.
There are very few times in history where it has actually been better in the ways that really count than now. Unfortunately, personally, I do not want to live in a world before antibiotics and the Green Revolution. But if I had to, I would go back to 1920s Paris and I'd be hanging out with these people. Or at least I'd try to. They probably wouldn't have me.
But I feel like you'd do pretty well there, John. I think you'd fit in. Speaking of which, have you seen Midnight in Paris, the Woody Allen movie where he imagines this happening?
No, but I know of it.
I remember. Yeah.
I've seen one Woody Allen movie in my entire life. Do you want to guess which one it is?
Annie Hall.
Nope.
Manhattan.
Nope. I'll give you a hint. It's not one of the ones people usually watch.
Is it Ants?
Nope. Purple Rose of Cairo.
Oh, I've heard that's actually pretty good.
Pretty good.
Midnight in Paris is not good. It's basically all the best stereotypes of this period. Just and if Woody Allen, played by Owen Wilson, was there, basically. So
yeah, I'm pretty allergic to nostalgia as a theme at all. And despite me saying that I would go back in time and hang out with these people, or if I had to go back in time, this is where I would choose to go. I don't really want to just watch someone else fantasize about that for like 2 hours. That doesn't sound particularly fun to me.
Yeah, and Hemingway is just like, if you're a writer, declare yourself the best writer, unless you want to fight about it. So as opposed to the guy presented in Movable Feast who doesn't know what a lesbian is. So.
Yeah, I'm not like anti Hemingway by any means, but out of like, again, this kind of like crowd of people, he's probably my least favorite.
Yeah, I hadn't read him in a while, and I was reading some of Movable Feast because I remembered there's a lot of Gertrude Stein anecdotes, and I forgot how nice he is to read, but I also don't like him that much. Like at the same time, like he's quite good at that reportive minimalist, like very masculine journal style, like journalist, like just the details, just the facts. But at the same time, I'm like, I would rather watch like a Baroque stylist like Gertrude Stein or something than Hemingway if given the chance. So
yeah, I mean, it's definitely kind of a thing of, like, it's less that I don't like Hemingway, more that I don't like his impact on the art of writing, like as a whole, like how many bad Hemingway imitators I've come across in my travels.
Well, also like the iceberg thing, the idea that like 7/8 or whatever of the emotional impact of the story is below, like I feel like that applies just as well to 3 Lives, except you have to actually like really pay attention to get the emotional impact of like the iceberg that's underneath the repetition. Like the same thing could apply to anything else. Like it's not like special, I guess. I don't know.
Say, I mean, it's true of any piece of art. Again, you can say the same thing about Nightwood. Like just because the prose is complicated, like that's just, sorry, Ernest. Like that's just how the unconscious works.
Do you know that story of when like Orson Welles was watching a movie that Hemingway worked on, and Orson Welles knew that Hemingway was in the audience, so he started like acting really campy, where he'd go, "Oh, who wrote this film?" like, and being like, and like camping it up. And Hemingway got so mad that he started fighting him in the theater, and like they were like punching each other. And then they turned the lights on, and they just immediately started laughing, and they forgot about it. Like.
That's lovely.
But the idea that Orson Welles like knew that if he started acting like campy, it would just make Ernest Hemingway so angry is like beautiful to me. Like just
2 big fat guys punching each other and then getting over it.
But like Orson Welles just like masterfully triggering him by being like, "Oh, who wrote this?" Like, like this is awful. Like,
my God.
Exactly. Like that's the thing. It's like you read Hemingway and you're just like you're a great writer, but you're so like I can look into your head. Like that's what it feels like. Like I'm just looking into your head all the time. So
yeah, just hard on the sleeve in both the best and the worst way possible. I suppose.
Yeah.
Well, enough about Ernest Hemingway.
Yeah,
we're not being very woke right now, Ben.
Sorry, I like I said, I didn't want to spend too much time on that, but I wanted to get it down. Yeah, we should let's do the official title drop. You're listening to the Infinite Library podcast. I'm your host, Ben.
I'm your host, John. Gonna apologize in advance to the listeners. I feel like this is gonna be a little bit of I'll put it that Could be like a gas leak episode.
It's a Spring Madness episode, John. Yeah, we have one of these every year, and I look forward to it the same way that I would look forward to my entire order in life being destabilized. Which, John, did you notice 2 of these stories that happens in this book? So.
To reference back to a previous Spring Madness episode, sorry, William Carlos Williams. The whole world does not depend on a red wheelbarrow. It depends on steady traffic running through the Strait of Hormuz.
So much depends upon the Strait of Hormuz. That's just the whole poem. Yes, because we're going back to the modernist well, and we're reading 3 Lives, or we're discussing 3 Lives by Gertrude Stein, published in.
Yeah, we already read it. We're discussing it.
Yeah, right. We're discussing it. Published in 1909.
Yeah. So Ben, I guess I know we kind of did like a little background chatter already, but I'm curious. What's your relationship with Miss Stein?
So I was thinking about this, and I feel like. This is the stereotype about Stein, is that you either find her more interesting as a person than actually read her, or you've heard a lot about her, but you haven't read her yourself. And I think that applies to me to a T, because I feel like with a lot of modernists, I feel like I need to take like a running start. And I feel like I've been taking a running start at actually reading Gertrude Stein for like 15 years or something. Like I feel like I heard about her in undergrad with Tender Buttons, which I'm glad that we're not covering, because I don't feel like I understood Tender Buttons until I read other people talk about it, specifically, ding, 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 William Gass, who you might hear a lot about this episode, because Gass is also quite a great explainer of Gertrude Stein. And so it's only really through other people that I heard about her. And when I read Tender Buttons, it just kind of like bounced off my head like a tennis ball, like bouncing against a wall, where I was just like, oh, that's interesting. And there's actually quite a lot going on under the surface, as well as in 3 Lives. And so given that I, like I was saying in my last episode, am seized by spring modernist madness, I felt like this podcast would be a good excuse to actually read 3 Lives, which Gass rather funnily calls in that essay I sent you, like the one that all the half-wits know about is like 3 Lives. Even though, like, if you read, I have a quote by Edmund Wilson, who is one of the earliest explainers of the modernists, and he really loves 3 Lives, and he's like, everything else he doesn't know what to say anything about, funnily enough. But yeah, so heard a lot about, and I was like, I need to actually read her. And so thus this episode.
Love it. Yeah. I am also kind of coming to Gertrude Stein as a reader for the first time. I obviously knew she was a writer and a very important, modernist, prose stylist for a long time. But I actually feel like most of my knowledge about Gertrude Stein comes more from my studies in art history.
Oh, nice.
Reading about kind of the role she played in the lives of people like Cezanne and Picasso, the collecting that she did, kind of bringing the European avant-garde like into sharper focus, particularly kind of for an American audience. So I had not read anything of her, but I felt not familiar. Like, I don't necessarily know that I felt familiar with her work, but she's someone I've known as a character a lot longer than I've known her as an author, if that makes sense.
Right. And I think that's like what she wanted. If you sort of get into her, the way she presented herself to this European coterie, and like the way she became almost like a American literary celebrity, like when she eventually went back to America as like a part of a tour. I think like she's very much somebody who is consciously creating a persona, and I think it's one that you find out about before you actually read her, I think.
Yeah.
And I think that's also why Gass is obsessed with her, because he's quite into people like Rilke, who project this image of the artist before even though their art is just as good. It's sort of like the persona playing stuff.
Yeah.
And regarding her role as a European, like you were saying, art sort of center, Ryan Ruby actually from Context Collapse had a nice little line about her where he says, she is the central node in one of the densest artist networks ever configured that regulated the passage of nearly every writer, as well as that of a rising generation of expat popularizers whom she was to tutor, fall out with, and eventually label lost. Pablo Picasso, Ernest Hemingway, F. Scott Fitzgerald, Sinclair Lewis, Ezra Pound, Sherwood Anderson, Andre Matisse, you know, all the stars are here. And I think like that's one reason why you might find out about her. But also I like that in some of her background, which we don't have to get too into, but like she moved to Paris with her brother, and her brother actually was one of the first people to start buying art. And like her brother, I think, kind of had sort of like a aggravating influence on her, so that when her brother eventually left, that's when she sort of like came into her own, we could say, and she took up the art collecting. And Cezanne was actually a big influence on Three Lives, which we're talking about today. And there's a story that she wrote a lot of Three Lives when she was looking at the portrait of Madame Cezanne, which hung above her desk while she was writing this. And so definitely somebody who is synthesizing a lot of modernist art with writing, a lot like William Carlos Williams, now that I think about it.
Yeah, definitely. You know, I think that as we kind of get into talking about the book itself, I don't know kind of where we're going to cut in of our kind of pre-show chatter here.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that something you pointed to, Ben, and something I want to kind of foreground here is when this book was written. You know, it's something where modernism is, I mean, I don't know if it's unique in this regard, but you know, it's a what's the word I'm looking for? It's a movement, a genre, like with kind of a slippery relationship with time, I feel like.
Yeah.
You know, I feel like we talked about this a little bit in our last episode on Dunford's Travels Everywheres. You know, this book was written in 1909. William Carlos Williams wasn't writing until like 20 years later. And then you have, you know, Kelly writing in the 70s, and it's all still modernism, baby.
Right. Well, yeah, because Ulysses was, I think, when was Ulysses? 1920. Yeah. So 11 years to go after this. But yeah, all still modernism.
At the same time, I think kind of like you were saying before we started, you know, if there's something that doesn't, I don't know what to say doesn't work, because that doesn't quite feel right. But if there's something that like you really feel when you read this, it's the fact that it was written in 1909.
Well, but I also, like I was telling you, I feel like I am reading like direct speech, like writing, and it sounds like the way people write direct speech. It sounds like the way Hemingway wrote direct speech, like fucking Hills Like White Elephants. But then, yeah, and then eventually, then you suddenly get like some very dated stereotypes and representations of the people that Gertrude Stein, you know, was not that closely, like she didn't know that much about. So,
yeah. Well, I guess that's probably enough preamble. Do we want to actually get into talking about the book proper? Because we kind of have three separate pieces to talk about here. So maybe we don't want to like take too much more time kind of hemming and hawing.
Well, let me use Edmund Wilson from Axel's Castle here, because he wrote a great intro to his chapter on Stein. So Gertrude Stein, born in Allegheny, Pennsylvania, a student of psychology and medicine who is said to have been considered by William James the most brilliant woman pupil he had ever had, published in 1909 a book of fiction called Three Lives. It was brought out by a small and obscure publisher, and at the time attracted little attention, but loaned from hand to hand, it acquired a certain reputation. Three Lives, which bore on its title page a quotation from Laforgue, was a work of what would be at the time have been called realism, but it was realism of a rather novel kind. The book consisted of three long short stories, the histories of three women, two of them German servant girls, the other a mulatto girl. What is most remarkable in these stories, especially if we compare them with such a typical naturalistic production as Flaubert's A Simple Heart, in which we feel that the old family servant has been seen from a great distance and documented with effort, is the closeness with which the author has been able to identify herself with her characters. And I like that he pointed out the Flaubert parallel, because Flaubert put out 3 tales, which is just clearly in dialogue with, there's a very prominent use of a parrot in 3 tales, and the parrot shows up in the first story and is promptly forgotten so that Gertrude Stein can talk more about dogs, which she has a clear affinity for talking about, and the parrot does not appear in the other 2 stories. But I thought Wilson did a great job of setting the table, so to speak, with his little intro.
Yeah, definitely. I don't actually have anything to add there. Lost my train of thought.
Well, I mean, we can start. Do you want to start with the first story, which is The Good Anna?
The Good Anna. And folks, we're not talking about friend of the show, Anna.
We're not. We're talking about, a German servant lady girl who is, like, I think both domineering and like cares for the people that she takes care of, and that sort of like pendulum sway between like interfering with the lives of the people that she's supposed to take care of and then stepping back seems to be kind of like the crux of the story.
Yeah, so I feel like just to kind of like foreground, I guess, my overall thoughts, all 3 of these stories I think are kind of interesting to me because on the surface, like we were saying, not quite on like the level of Hemingway in this way, but like they're all pretty straightforward in terms of what they're describing.
Yeah.
They tell, like, in some ways, like there's not even like a lot of story here a lot of the time.
Yes. Yeah.
These are pretty like zoomed out like pictures of the lives of these 3 women. But kind of because they feel so zoomed out, and I don't know how much of this is intentional, how much of this is maybe the fact that Stein is kind of, again, writing a little outside of her own personal experience. Like there's this way in which like some of these stories, like they feel like there's some element of like Gertrude Stein's own self or life in them, but there's also kind of this way in which it feels like she's writing about people who are very different from her. There is this sense of remove that I don't quite know if I want to say it makes the stories feel mysterious. That feels like kind of an exaggeration. But there's this level on which like I don't feel like what they're quote unquote about is necessarily always right there, the way that you might expect kind of a realist story to do.
Yeah, in fact, I would say they're about the sentences. like they're not about it, like, yeah, plot, or I mean the psychology and the emotions are there, but yeah, like no plot, not a lot of like social detail. It's really just about like, oh, now this person feels stuck, and so the sentences are like plotting, and now this person is happy, and now the sentences are like sing-song cadency, and like that like feeling is like, yeah, it's like they're about the words. They're not really like about like what they're about, if that makes any sense. Yeah.
No. Yeah. Well, I mean, because there's a I don't know what to say, it's a facile reading, but there's a basic level in which you read these stories, and I think like what I'd say that all 3 of them were about is, again, in this like realist mode or level we're talking about, like they're about the ways in which like women have their kind of hopes, expectations, possibilities in life are curtailed by society, by various means, and kind of the ways in which there's an internal struggle against that fact. Like you said, Ben, there's this way in which like the good Anna is both like domineering, but also very caring, but she's also someone who spends her whole life taking care of other people. She wants to have control over her own life, but she can only express it through trying to kind of control the people that she works for.
In a very German way, we're told. So.
But she never quite is able to like have her own life. And then when she does, she becomes, if anything, less controlling, but kind of doesn't ruin herself exactly, but does not kind of carry herself with the same confidence that maybe she had before.
Yeah, it's like wounded by time and by like your expectations being dashed, which I feel like is something that happens in the other stories as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's a way in which like all three of these stories, spoiler alert, they all end with the main character or the protagonist dying.
Like a broken heart too, kind of like
yeah, they're all sad in that way, but they don't, again, like it's not like melodrama. It's very matter of fact.
Yeah, to me, it almost feels like Stein just is like, I'm done with this person. Like, I almost feel like you can feel the not the actual author, but like the implied author, like taking a step back and being like, well, and then nothing really happened, and she died. like it's like it's all. And I almost found the way that the story steps back from like the emotional identification to be like kind of crushing, because it's like, and now like I can't relate to this person anymore and they died. like it's like there's something about that like is both like I don't know what else to say as an actual author, but the implied author is like no longer identifying with the emotional like trials of the character, and so then they pass away. So
yeah, I mean, there's something that also again feels maybe a little bit, again, kind of a piece with your earlier point about the language really being the point here. It's kind of this way in which, because the point of the story is really to just express like what Gertrude Stein wants to do with the language.
Yeah.
Like the characters have to die because like there isn't anything that happens after this.
Yeah.
There isn't, an implication of continuation. Like the song's over. Like, get out of here.
Yeah, right. And I have a sample from the good Anna. This is the first instance of spring madness. It was an early spring day in the South. The fields and woods were heavy from the soaking rains. The horses dragged the carriage slowly over the long road, sticky with brown clay and rough with masses of stones, thrown here and there to be broken and trodden into place by passing teams. Over and through the soaking earth was the feathery new spring growth of little flowers, of young leaves, and of ferns. The tree tops were all bright with reds and yellows, with brilliant gleaming whites and gorgeous greens. All the lower air was full of the damp haze rising from heavy soaking water on the earth, mingled with a warm and pleasant smell from the blue smoke of the spring fires in all the open fields. And above all this was the clear upper air and the songs of birds and the joy of sunshine and of lengthening days. The languor and the stir, the warmth and weight and the strong feel of life from the deep centers of the earth that comes always with the early soaking spring, when it is not answered with an act of fervent joy, gives always anger, irritation, and unrest. To Anna, alone there in the carriage, drawing always nearer to the struggle with her mistress, the warmth, the slowness, the jolting over stones like steaming from the horses, the cries of men and animals and birds, and the new life all around about were simply maddening. Baby, if you don't lie still, I think I kill you. I can't stand it anymore like this. And you can so there's that great beautiful depiction of nature, and then in the second paragraph, it's like all of that's piling on the character, and the sentence does that. There's a pile of all those clauses, like the languor, the warmth, the weight, and it's weighing down on her in this carriage, and she's gonna explode. And I feel like you actually get that in the sentence itself, and you're not just being told that that's happening.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely feel like I see what you're saying there, and I feel like, again, when I think about what I like about modernism, it's this. It's the utilization of, for lack of a better term, the physicality of the language.
Yeah.
In this way that I think a lot of other writing doesn't quite take as far. But at the same time, I'm also, I do find myself a little alienated by, the way Stein writes. It does not necessarily, it's not necessarily always a pleasant reading experience. And it doesn't feel like you get to the end of one of these novellas and like you don't feel cheated necessarily, but the kind of bargain you think you're getting when you're reading the story, whether that's literary fiction, genre fiction, blah blah, there's some idea of like, even if the ending is purposely subverting your expectations, or is undercutting what you expect to happen, there's still like a sense of I guess catharsis there.
Yeah.
And like I don't feel that in these stories.
Yeah, and I agree with that 100% because I feel like unless I'm not 100% locked in, I'm like I'm just missing a lot of this. You'd have to be really closely paying attention to realize that like in that example I just read, the languor and the stir, the warmth and the weight and the strong feel of life, like you have to notice like, oh, that's all piling on the main part of the sentence, which is Anna. And it's doing the thing that the sentence is talking about. If I'm not like locked in, I'm just like, why is the sentence taking so long to get to the subject? Like I'm just like, it's like the amount of attention I feel like I had to expend to read some of this stuff was like, I couldn't do it throughout all of them. Like it would wax and wane and then I'd get to the end and I'd be like, all right, there, she died. Like at the end. Like, yeah. So, but
I mean, it's just like, it's a level of craft that I don't even want to say that this is like contemporary fiction doesn't do this. I don't want to be that type of person, but it's just like, even for like modernism, like it feels like there is such a level of subtle attention to rhythm and cadence here that it's striking, but it can feel hard to notice.
Yeah. Like you have to really, it's not, I mean, a lot of what I'm saying, I feel like it's just me ripping off Gass because Gass is such a great reader of Stein. But like at one point he says like people aren't really used to reading this way anymore. Like it's reading for like the ear and for what it sounds like, not for the page, which like he says is how most people write anyway. And we could extend that further and say like, yeah, most people write so they can get adapted into a TV show. So you can look at it. You don't even have to like read it. Like, and so like there's like reading for the ear and then that. And so like I feel like when you're trying to really pay attention to what Stein is doing, it's a lot more oral. Like it's the way the words sound, like you were talking about.
Yeah, I also feel like, and this might just be me talking out my ass too, but I feel like again, when I read Stein and when I read like, I don't know, a lot of the modernists actually, it reminds me like this was a time when I think to be literate was to read a lot more poetry than now. Because there's this way in which like Stein, I think it'd be very hard to learn to write prose this way, just like qua prose.
Yeah.
Like I feel like this is very much someone who read a lot of poetry, wrote poetry, and then carried the lessons of writing poetry into writing prose.
Yeah. Well, and to borrow a Gass line, he says, still, she listened to Leo, she looked at Cezanne, she translated Flaubert, and this subordination of eye, ear, and mind eventually released her because of Flaubert and Cezanne taught the same lesson. As she examined the master's portrait of his wife, she realized that the reality of the model had been superseded by the reality of the composition. So the idea that like you're saying, John, if you read enough poetry and you look at enough Cezanne and Flaubert, it's not that I have to depict my subject accurately. It's that I can depict my subject however I want. And the decisions that I make in doing that are what makes art, not like verisimilitude or whatever. It's like me making artistic decisions. So.
Yeah, no, I mean, again, I'm thinking back to something you said kind of when we started, Ben, and I promise we will get back to the actual stories themselves. But, despite it feels like there is a tension here between kind of what the work is purporting to be.
Yeah.
Which is, again, this series of 3 short stories or novellas or whatever word we want to use, depicting the very grounded lives of 3 more or less working class women in this, American women in particular, like living in one place. this fictional town of Bridgeport, which is apparently based on Baltimore. So there is this kind of very grounded mission statement that you get when you're like, again, reading the copy on the back of this book. And then you read it, and again, you don't really like the actual details of the world. Like, Bridgeport does not feel like a real place on any level. Like, there is absolutely no work that goes into like making this apparently, again, like fictional town based on Baltimore feel like a place at all. There's no discussion of like how this town is laid out, the neighborhoods, we don't know where any of these characters live in relationship to any others or to each other. It is all like a complete like pasteboard like diorama. It's a not even a dollhouse.
Yeah, they're just standing on like chalk diagrams, like it's Dogville or something. Like, yeah.
So there's this level in which, like, despite it being like, it is grounded, like nothing crazy happens in this book. Like, there's no wizards anywhere. There's not even like a particularly intense dream sequence. But at the same time, like, there is this really, I think, kind of surreal quality brought on by the way she's employing language, despite, again, pretty mundane subject matter. And, again, like, there are these strange phrases she uses, and a lot of times repeats throughout. In the story we're talking about right now, we might have referenced this in kind of our, again, pre-show chatter. She describes this woman as the great romance of the main character of the first story, the good Anna's life.
The narrator steps forward to remind the reader, remember that this person is the great love of Anna's life. Yeah,
the great romance. No, always the great romance.
The great romance.
And the only romance of her life. And so, given Stein's, recorded predilections, like, there is a way in which you wonder, like, okay, is this a lesbian story? But it doesn't totally feel like that. There's nothing that like this is not even like as straightforward as Nightwood was, where it's like, oh, even though it's not like a love story per se, even though it's not like we're not watching these characters like make out or go on dates or anything like that. It's like, it could be motioning towards some kind of lesbianism. It could be motioning towards just an intense friendship. It could be motioning towards something more obscure. I found myself wondering, like, do we romance here? Is this romance as in a love story? Is this romance as in like the Don Quixote sense, a chivalric romance? Is this, something that was exciting and adventuresome in this person's life because this woman was interesting to her in some way that other people were not? And Stein never quite tells us what's going on here, but she keeps repeating it to us.
In
this way that just makes it all the weirder.
To give a brief sample, Anna every spare minute ran to her friend Mrs. Littman for comfort and advice. She begged her friend to be with her when she told the news to Miss Mary. Perhaps, if Miss Littman had not been in Bridgepoint, Anna would have tried to live in the new house. Mrs. Littman did not urge her to this thing, nor even give her this advice. But feeling for Miss Littman, as she did, made even faithful Anna not quite so strong in her dependence on Miss Mary's need as she would otherwise have been. Remember, Miss Littman was the romance in Anna's life. The way that comes in again is so insistent. Repetition is an extremely important thing because every time you repeat something, it changes. It's not the same. And so I think to what you're describing, John, every time that remember, Miss Lemon was the romance in Anna's life is repeated, it's slightly different. And so we don't exactly know what it is. And I think, like, to me, it's like this kind of like emotional yearning or this hopefulness or this like, emotional, we could just say like life that this like serving existence almost has no room for. And so the fact that it's like there at all, it feels like this flame or something that is constantly being like, like put out by just the way it is to be a woman at this time in the fictional Baltimore.
Yeah. And I mean, there's also this level on which, again, there's the old, I can't think of the right word here. I'm going to say adage, show, don't tell.
Yeah.
Stein's all about telling.
Yeah.
But in this way that, again, makes it all the more mysterious because she will tell us directly what these characters are thinking or, will describe it in this very blunt way, but in a way that actually does not tell us what the character is thinking or feeling because we aren't in their shoes, really. Yeah.
And I feel like the only way you can know what exactly is going on is the way that the sentences are made. like the sentences will be happy sounding, even if they're not quite explaining what you're saying, or they'll be like discordant sounding. I kept thinking of like somebody playing like nice lines on a piano when I was reading these stories. And then when there would be like something bad was happening, it would be like really jangly piano notes. But also like I was not able to like sustain this level of attention just because, as you were alluding to, John, there's a lot of stuff going on right now in the world. And so there were times when I was like, oh, I'm getting it, and other times I'm not. And it's like, to me, it's most apparent in Melanctha, where like the sentences will sound good when people are feeling good. Anna, it's definitely in there, but for some reason I could really tell with Melanctha the most.
Yeah, I mean, I think that also probably comes down to the fact that despite, again, kind of the weirdness in other ways of Melanctha. Right. Probably, I think the most interesting of the three pieces.
Yeah.
Just in terms of like what Stein is doing and how she does it.
Yeah, and we can talk about that now. But my last point about Anna was just, I mentioned it earlier. It's just so funny that a parrot shows up and the parrot is not really described, but then man, does Stein describe dogs. Yeah. I'm gonna see if I can find just a part about the dog because it's just so funny that like how clearly Stein is much more, and she had dogs, is much more interested in dogs. So just one brief paragraph. Rags was a pleasant, jolly little fellow. The good Anna liked him very well, but never with strength, as she loved her good-looking coward, foolish young man, Peter. Baby was the dog of her past life, and she held Anna with old ties of past affection. Peter was the spoiled, good-looking young man of her middle age, and Rags was always something of a toy. She liked him, but he never struck in very deep. Rags had strayed in somehow one day, and then when no home for him was quickly found, he had just stayed right there. It was a very happy family there all together in the kitchen. The good Anna and Sally, and old Baby, and young Peter, and the jolly little Rags. So the last three people who are named are not, in fact, people. They are dogs. And so if you're not paying close attention, like sometimes I would say, wait, is this person being described right now a dog or someone? And you can tell that the prose is just so much more interested in describing how one interacts with a dog than one interacts with a parrot. And to me, the parrot is just like, oh, Flaubert had a parrot in 3 Lives. I should have a parrot. Or 3 Tales. I should have a parrot. But it's just clear that Stein doesn't know what to say about a parrot because she probably doesn't have one. And so it's just like not depicted very closely as the dogs are. So,
well, and I think there's also something there again in terms of what the good Anna doesn't care about the parrot.
Oh yeah.
Here's about dogs.
Yeah. And it's I love that the dogs love her because the dogs love her unconditionally, whereas people don't. So and that's kind of her whole problem. So yeah. But
I mean, do we have anything else we want to say about the good Anna? I feel like we've kind of talked around it a lot, but I don't know. I didn't find this one to be This was probably the one I found the least interesting.
Yeah, I actually read Melanchthon first.
Interesting.
And,
okay.
Yeah, and that because I had heard so much about it, and also, again, sorry to bring this up, Gass has an essay about Melanchthon, and he spends most of his time talking about that. But yeah, I read that first, and then I read Anna, and then I read Lena. So yeah, I say on to Melanchthon. Well, we were talking about Melanchthon, which I thought it was Melanchthon, and then I had to look it up. I think it's Melanchthon because that's the same vowel as Anna and Lena. So I think it's Melanchthon, which I think was intentional. My dumb ass was Melanchthon, and it was like, it's not quite as melodious as Melanchthon.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe this is something about my brain, but like when I read the title, I was like, oh, that's Greek for Black Earth, but in the feminine form, much like, just like Martin Luther's mini-me, Philip Melanchthon. Because I spent way too much time reading about the Protestant Reformation 2 years ago.
I mean, I feel like that's probably indicative of how Stein went about picking the name.
Yeah. It's one of those things where I read the title not knowing what this one was about.
I also like the mysterious subtitle, "Each one as she may." Anyway, yeah.
And I was like, again, that's when my brain did the thing where it was like, oh, I recognize that. That's Black Earth in Greek. Da da da. And then I got to it, and I was like, Gertrude Stein. Oh, what? You can't do that.
You can't be saying that, white baby. Now, okay,
like,
John, it's interesting.
One of those things where, I found myself just wondering, like, has anyone in history actually been named Melanchthon, or is this like the equivalent of, like, is this Gertrude Stein doing like the 1909 equivalent of like a Jaquavius joke?
Well, so like, I think that's an interesting question, because it's like, we could say Stein is on one hand being like, I'm going to write about people who are not written about. I'm going to write about the, neglected lower class people. I'm going to write about Black people who haven't been written about, because that's what authors do. But the problem is that she doesn't know anything about that. And so like, it's almost like she comes up with a name that might linguistically make sense, but isn't maybe. And then the ways that she talks about certain aspects of Black life in this story are, they're stereotypical, they're derivative, they're racist. But the language is also amazing. So this is such a weird, it's a weird parallel. Like, there's a tension here between those two. And like, if you look on Storygraph, like every other Storygraph review is just racist, 2 thumbs down, get out of here. And it's like, one, the fact that people cite this as one of her best things merits a second look. And two, interestingly enough, Richard Wright, the famous Black author, has an anecdote about this story where he says, prompted by a random curiosity while I was browsing one day in the Chicago Public Library, I took from the open shelves a tiny volume called 3 Lives and looked at a story in it entitled Melanchthon. The style was so insistent and original and sang so quaintly that I took the book home. As I read it, my ears were opened for the first time to the magic of the spoken word. I began to hear the speech of my grandmother, who spoke a deep, pure Black dialect and with whom I had lived for many years. All of my life, I had been only half hearing, but Miss Stein's struggling words made the speech of the people around me vivid. From that moment on, in my attempts at writing, I was able to tap at will the vast pool of living words that swirled around me. But in the midst of my delight, I was jolted. A left-wing literary critic, whose judgment I had been led to respect, condemned Miss Stein in a sharply worded newspaper article, implying that she spent her days reclining upon a silken couch in Paris, smoking hashish, that she was a hopeless prey to hallucinations, and that her tortured verbalisms were throttling the revolution. I was disturbed. Had I duped myself into worshipping decadence? Believing in direct action, I contrived a method to gauge the degree to which Miss Stein's prose was tainted with the spirit of counter-revolution, I gathered a group of semi-literate black stockyard workers, basic proletarians with the instinct for revolution, am I quoting right, into a black belt basement and read Melanctha aloud to them. They understood every word. Enthralled, they slapped their thighs, howled, laughed, stomped, and interrupted me constantly to comment upon the characters. My fondness for Steinian prose never distressed me after that. So, but also you can read, there's another black critic who said, like, this has nothing to say about black life, and in fact is probably more about Jewish women than black women. So, you know, differences abound, but I find that Richard Wright anecdote to be interesting.
Well, I think there's something there. Forgive me again if I'm talking out of my ass, but the spring madness is upon me, and I find myself compelled to try to make a case for this, even while maybe not even make a case for it, but just to maybe think about, like, again, this is like a construction more than like a true depiction of black life in some level. Like, I think we've said enough about the fact that, like, this is not really a realist construction. I don't know that Stein, I don't know how much Stein really meant to accurately portray black life here, or like working class life in any of these stories, which maybe is a whole other can of worms about why she felt like she should or could, like, speak in these idioms. But I find myself thinking, again, kind of to go back to our last episode on Dunford's Travels Everywheres, you know, the way in which, like, black language, you know, comes to, like, be I'm struggling to find the right words here, but, you know, the way in which, like, white people feel compelled to pick up on black language. You know, I think that there's a way in which, while this story might be, as the other critic said, really more about Jewish women, Jewish life, than black people and black life. What I find myself thinking about here is the way in which, what this feels like to me is Stein just having a tremendous ear for language and kind of picking up on cadences that I'm sure she heard in her life. Again, in this way that is kind of hard to think about now, because, again, we live in a world where, despite there still being, like, tremendous, like, racial and ethnic segregation, you know, implicitly or explicitly, like, woven into our society, like, because of mass media, like, we have access to, like, this type of language that we don't speak in a way that, like, people in the past did not. You know, this is something that, like, I feel like Stein caught people talking this way in the background of her life, or, you know, maybe sometimes in the foreground of her life, really getting to, maybe she did know some, I'm assuming she knew some black people in some capacity. But picking up on it as a register and as a music. And I'm not saying that makes the racist elements of this story, like, irrelevant or not worth talking about. But I think that if we're looking at this less as what it purports to be, you know, if we're not doing the exoteric reading of this, if we're doing the Straussian esoteric reading of Three Lives, you know, that this is really, I think, more a piece of music than an actual, like, novel or novella. I think that you know, she is using what maybe we'd call today, like, African American vernacular English, as, like, an instrument in her orchestra here. And I think that on that level, what she does here is again interesting on, like, a constructive level, even if it's appropriative.
And I like that reading, John, because to me, I find that, like, when the stuff that sticks with me is not the stuff where she's like trying to do black speech, although she is trying to do it, especially in the bits where Melanchthon is being catcalled. I felt like was like Stein showing her research. But like, again, like a paragraph, another Spring Magnus paragraph, like I kept thinking about this paragraph a lot, which I think is, again, like with the other Spring paragraph, like attempting to capture what it feels like when you're conflicted emotionally. And so this paragraph goes, all that long day with the warm, moist, young spring stirring in him, Jeff Campbell worked and thought and beat his breast and wandered and spoke aloud and was silent and was certain and then in doubt and then keen to surely feel and then all sodden in him. And he walked, and he sometimes ran fast to lose himself in his rushing, and he bit his nails to pain and bleeding, and he tore his hair so that he could be sure he was really feeling, and he never could know what it was right he now should be doing. Like, and like, you can feel that like way, like the cadence of that sentence is like split, but then it rises to like, I'm fucking like bleeding myself because I don't feel anything. And then it like slows down. And like that happens throughout this whole story, the way that like Melanchthon and Jeff Campbell get really close to each other and then go apart. And I feel like that's kind of like the motion of this story, because Melanchthon is like, she feels things very deeply. She's quite emotional. And Jeff Campbell is like constantly having to think over everything really slowly and like weigh certain things and talk about them. And like, to me, that movement and the way to me, that almost seems like a narrator paragraph, and like the ways people are talking that like is throughout the whole story. And that like cadence is like, yeah, again, mesmerizing when you're like really paying attention, and then other times you're just like, haven't we heard this before? And it's like, yeah, that's the point. Like, people have to keep repeating themselves. So yeah,
you know, I know I literally just said like, oh, this isn't really like a realist piece of fiction. I do think there's like a lot of emotional truth in this story in particular. You know, there are these paragraphs that feel like sticky. Like, you know, in kind of the midpoint of the story where we're watching kind of this abortive relationship between the main character Melanchthon and Jefferson Campbell, who's a young black doctor. You know, they're coming together, and you know, the paragraphs suddenly become like a whole page.
Yes. Yeah.
And you're having like whole dialogues happen like in one paragraph, you know, with no indentations like you would normally see in this kind of like back and forth dialogue. And it creates this incredibly like heavy, fraught atmosphere.
Yeah.
Like, that I found deeply compelling.
Yeah. Well, it's like they're merging together in those moments too. Like, yeah.
I mean, it felt very true to like the way that like early phases of like a relationship can feel.
Yeah.
Especially like a relationship that's that has like ambivalence.
Yeah.
And that probably is not going to go well. You know, forming a romantic relationship, I think, is almost always like a deeply, you know, despite the fact that our culture, you know, valorizes and prizes it so much, it actually, I think, tends to be a very like destabilizing and like dysregulating experience.
And that happens to Jeff Campbell.
And you know, he is a character who, I've known people like this. I've been in relationships with people like this. People who have to talk about their emotions, seemingly because they can't feel them.
Yeah, and with Jeff Campbell too, it's like he has to keep talking about it. He doesn't think he's felt something, and then when he like feels real anguish after they break up, he's like, "I'm feeling something now." like it's kind of like heartbreaking, and I almost feel like it's interesting that again, these three stories are about women, but like Melanchthon spends a lot of time on Jeff's POV for like this feeling that you're talking about.
Yeah, it's straight like Melanchthon really enters the the background
Yeah.
of the story in a way. And some of that is because it is focusing on the fact that like Jefferson like can't know her in the way that like he wants to, or like he doesn't feel like he can trust the things she says, or you know, again, it's this thing that feels very true to life in a way of when you are getting to know someone for the first time. You know, you feel like you know them, but you don't. You want to know them, but you find the idea of actually getting to know what they're like to be deeply unsettling and scary.
And like you only know certain positive things with them, but there's all this other stuff that you just can't know. So
yeah, I mean, I also wonder if there is something there, again, not to keep harping on like racist Gertrude Stein, but it's like, oh, is this also because she can probably relate a lot more to this young educated doctor than to this like much more ambiguous character?
Well, like, I mean, I can see that, but I feel like you get sentences like Melanctha Herbert was always losing what she had in wanting all the things she saw. Melanctha was always being left when she was not leaving others. And I feel like that like gets a lot of the like the emotional landscape of the women in the story in like 2 sentences. just wanting all the things she saw, always being left when she was not leaving others. And so it's interesting that like she does that and then, spends a lot of time with Campbell, like having to talk about everything. And like, to your point, John, we know that Gertrude Stein is a great talker. Hemingway said that in he's always talking about that in A Movable Feast. But Gertrude Stein's always like, he says something like there's no break in any of the conversation. It's like Gertrude Stein is just constantly talking at him. He's like, wow, I'm learning so much. Anyway, but like, so yeah, I mean, I think to your point, John, maybe she does relate enough to Jeff that we can give more limelight to him compared to the women. So
yeah, you know, the more we talk about it, the more I'm kind of like feeling like I'm not being fair in saying that.
I mean, it's worth considering. Trite. Yeah, it's worth considering. Like, why is Jeff in this story at all? Like, the other men are like, there's no men in Good Anna. There's the husband in Lena, and then Jeff Campbell is like the one man.
There are men in good. There's the young doctor in Good Anna.
But isn't he like evil and nasty or something? I can't remember how he's described.
At first he's good. She loves working for him because he has like his male friends over and she can feed them.
they're nice and strong boys. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. And then he gets married. And his bitch wife doesn't like the way Anna does things.
Well, yeah. So again, like her emotional needs are subservient to the higher class people, at least in Anna. Well, yeah. And Melanctha too, like her father is a big character as well. So.
Yeah. I mean, and then, you know, her kind of second paramour in the story, Jem, who's a gambler.
Oh, yeah.
And is, you know, much more emotional than Jefferson, but because of that is much flightier and, you know, in some ways crueler. I
like how everyone's like, this relationship is going to go bad, and then it goes bad. like everyone's like, this is he's going to lose money. He's going to be mad when he loses money. So
yeah. Gambling is bad. just gonna take a moment out of the episode to again, we're in the throes of spring madness just to say gambling is bad.
Yeah, we will never take ads from Bet DSI. Should Bet DSI choose to sponsor this podcast. So I also want to talk about, there's a bit where I felt like I was levitating, which is when Stein uses the phrase green flecked. Which I felt like I was levitating. Let me see if I can find it. It was, or maybe she doesn't say green flecked. There's a part where they're having such a great time camping. And one of the paragraphs, or not camping, picnicking. And there's one of the paragraphs when Jeff and Melanctha are really closely together. One day there had been much joy between them, more than ever yet they had with their new feeling. All the day they had lost themselves in warm wandering. Now they were lying there and resting with a green, bright, light-flecked world around them. And I was like, holy crap. Like you can tell like the pair, like it's almost like there's like a halo around the words, and like, you know, light flecked is never used anywhere else. Like it's just used exactly once in this, like things are great between Jeff and Melantha. And since like the fact that they're mismatched, even though things are going so well, it immediately goes downhill after that. Where like Jeff is like, it was all green and warm and very lovely to him, and now Melantha somehow had made it all so ugly. What was it Melantha was now doing with him? What was it he used to be thinking was the right way for him and all black people to be always trying to make it right, the way they should be always living? Why was Melantha Herbert now also ugly for him? Like, it's just immediately like lost. And so like, yeah, I don't know. It's like, it's a long story too. It's like maybe like twice as long as the other ones.
It is the longest by a wide margin. It's like over 100 pages versus the others, which are like around 30.
Yeah, and so like she's really stretching out in that section, and you know the characters are like, now they talk, now they separate. Melantha gets Jem, the new partner. There's also who is her friend? Rose, yeah, the friend breakup. Again, yeah,
you know, it's interesting because actually the story really kind of at the beginning, it purports to be about how these two women who seem very different became friends.
Yeah, because Rose is experienced in a drunk or drinks, right? And Melantha wants experience very strongly.
Yeah. And then I mean, there's some other stuff in there too, which is just Gertrude Stein being racist.
Yeah, which we can just gloss over that. So, yeah, I mean, it's obviously it's not great, and it's weird that one of her like most well-read things has the stuff in it. It's just interesting. So
yeah, there's a lot of talk about, you know, the simple child heirs of black people that read badly.
See, that's what's so interesting to me about these group of stories, though, because like on one hand, like emotional truth is here, but at the same time, it's some of the worst stereotype and like trope stuff. Like it's, I don't know, that conflict is so interesting. So
yeah, it is interesting because there's this level in which, again, like as a construction, as like a piece of art built out of words, I'm like, this is a masterpiece.
Yeah.
Like again, just like the way this story is employing like the physicality of the page is breathtaking. And you know, I again, I did not read this out loud, but I you know, given your quote earlier, I think that would be an interesting like way to read this. I think that there's music in here, but then there's also the content of the words themselves,
right?
Which I find obnoxious and repugnant.
You know, which is so interesting too, because in that Gas essay, he talks about how like, you know, as a grad student, he like read this all in one night, and he read it once, and then he immediately read it again out loud. Like, and he was up like all night, and he was like wandering around on the quad, like, and he was like, why have I never heard music before? Basically, like, it's what he's like saying. Like, it's basically like Oppenheimer, you know, with the like when he's like staring at the artwork and he's like hearing stuff. Like that's basically William Gass's experience with this. And then at the same time, you're like, I guess he was able to look past some of the repugnant stuff, like, so.
I mean, again, but it really like is frustrating because there's a level on which, like, if someone came to me and was like, do you recommend reading this? Like, I want to be able to just like wholeheartedly be like, absolutely, like, this is fascinatingly written. It's employing language in such beautiful ways. And then I have to stop and be like, wait, there's all that incredibly just like gutter racism.
One last gas thing about Stein. I would, in effect, always carry three great faces in my wallet: Virginia Woolf's, Colette's, and Gertrude Stein's. If you ask, like a cinema soldier in a movie foxhole, I will take them out and show them to you. And it's like, yeah, can you imagine being like, here's a picture of Gertrude Stein that's in my wallet? It's like...
Machi.
Again, like, I don't think I've been able to, like I mentioned in the opening, I don't think I would hear the music without gas. Like, I don't think I would have come to this on my own, just because I feel like I'm slow and dim-witted most of the time. But yeah, it's like, and you can't really say like, yes, read this. And it's like, I know Dalkey just put out Making of Americans, which is like 600 pages of Melanctha, John. It's Melanctha, but 600 pages. And what's great is if you read people talking about it, like Hemingway was like, it started really great and then it just ruins, it's too long. Like, that's what Hemingway says. And then even Edmund Wilson says, because we read his intro regarding Making of Americans, I confess that I have not read this book all through and I do not know whether it is possible to do so. So like, I don't think you can recommend any of Stein wholeheartedly. It's like Three Lives, maybe Tender Buttons, good luck figuring it out without help, and then Making of Americans, yeah, like 600 pages. So
I mean, I guess if there is kind of a if modernism is a double-edged sword,
yeah,
which I'd argue, like all great art, it is. I'm not going to dwell too much on what that means. I don't even know what I meant by that.
It means you could get hurt. Yeah.
But if there is a dark side or a dangerous side to modernism, so to speak, I think it is the fact that it can be hard to sustain, in a way that, like, as much as books like, again, I guess to kind of go back to our conversation from the last episode about modernism and postmodernism, as much as it's kind of a joke to say like, what's the one that everyone makes fun of men for having on their bookshelves?
Not Infinite Jest?
Infinite Jest.
Oh, yeah.
As much as people talk about Infinite Jest being, like, joke about it being like a book no one's read, I'm guessing more people have read Infinite Jest than The Making of Americans.
Well, and now it's like, it's everyone's got their brand spanking new Dalkey archive copy. So, like,
but there is something about this way of using language that, again, even like in this story, which I think we were saying, like, the dialogue is actually very good and feels like very, there's a great ear behind it. There's a real, like, sense of emotional truth to it. There's a real beauty and music to it. It's also exhausting to read.
Yeah, like, again, like, I have maybe, the same thing also applies to Beckett, by the way. Like, you have to really be locked in to follow every cadence. And I feel like people were better at doing that in the times this was written for a myriad of obvious reasons. But it's like, now reading it, it's like, yeah, it's like, you got to really be, you can't get this, you can't read this distractedly at all. So.
Yeah, I found myself kind of wondering, and this is probably, like, again, kind of outside the scope of the show, like, how popular was this at the time? Like, well,
Edmund Wilson says it's like the Velvet Underground's first album, where, like, it didn't sell many copies, but everybody talked about it.
Everybody who read it wrote 3 lives of their own.
I mean, that's basically what Sherwood Anderson did. Like, if you read Winesburg, Ohio, like, it's basically
I hate that book. I hate that fucking book.
And that was, I think that was his version of this, because he's like, here are all these Midwestern grotesques, like,
yes, but if you consider that this book is interesting and that book is not.
Yeah, I think like I don't remember where, but apparently Stein got fed up. Oh yeah, Hemingway says that like at some point you weren't allowed to bring up Sherwood Anderson's name. Like it's like do not, even though like Stein was at one point very supportive of him. It's like don't talk to me about Sherwood Anderson again.
Yeah,
So,
I would love to damnatio memoriae Sherwood Anderson, and I would like to burn every copy of Winesburg, Ohio, personally.
I mean, I honestly think like, yeah, he was super impacted by this. You know, Hemingway, I think, was too, although maybe like less in the like art for art's sake part of it. So, but yeah.
I mean, okay. I think that maybe this is kind of be like, I feel like we don't have like the numbers in front of us. So maybe this is not quite the right tack to take here in terms of talking about this. I did have one other like question here, and maybe you know we could talk about this, and maybe we could move on to the gentle Lena, because I feel like we're getting a little long in the tooth here.
We are, yeah.
As a good Spring Madness episode should be. But okay, so obviously Stein is, I guess for lack of a better term, kind of a liminal figure. To use you know, vernacular of current times. You know, she's an American in Paris.
Yeah.
You know, and obviously the novel we were just talking about, The Making of Americans. This book is all about American lives.
Yeah.
What do you think being American means to Gertrude Stein?
I mean, it means a whole lot. Like so you can't, to me, quite tell in these stories, but like in her discussion of America is like space. Like it's the ability to make of yourself what you are, what you want to be, rather. And that's what she tried to do basically in Europe. And I would say she largely succeeded. So there's kind of like this American frontier, but she said that it's not like, basically the phrase that she says at one point is going west in the head, which I feel like she basically tries to do with her writing, with the way that she talked to other artists. And like it worked. Like she became something of a celebrity. But I feel like America is potential, is making yourself out of its bootstrap stuff. It's like it's the opposite of Europe, even though she was in Europe. Like it's not tradition. It's not, you know, paying fealty to your forefathers. It's not the one character in Knightwood, Felix, you know, who's pretending to be a baron, I think. You know, it's like it's potential. And I think like even though she wasn't in America, that to me comes out. You don't quite see it in Three Lives. I mean, Making of Americans is apparently about that, but I haven't read it. And you know, I think like if you read Gass talking about her, there's a lot about space, the space to be yourself, the space to not be controlled by men, specifically like her dad and her brother Leo. I think that to me is how she would answer that question, although I don't think it's apparent in Three Lives. So
yeah, you know, I and again, this might be something that like when this book was written, maybe this was not like a fully developed, you know, this is not like a theme she like would carry out as fully as, you know, she would later in her career. But I don't know, that's, you say that, and then I read this book, and this is a book all about people not being in control of their lives, not getting to be themselves, being desperately constrained at like almost all times by the circumstances of their birth. But you know, there is something here, and I think particularly in the first and the last story, the stories about these German women, they're immigrants in both stories. And they clearly like choose to come here. You know, I mean, obviously that's not a choice anyone made lightly. Most people who made that choice were not making it because things were going really great back in Europe. But like, there is something there in terms of like coming here and like being an immigrant and coming here and, you know, at least in Stein's writing, they're Americans. Like, these are American lives, despite the fact that these people were born in Germany.
Yeah, 3 American lives could be the full title. Yeah.
Yeah, and they're American, you know, again, at least in Stein's idiom. I'm not going to say this like it is not a controversial statement, but to Stein, like, these immigrant women are just as much Americans as like a black woman who was like born in America.
Yeah. I think that's, you know, that makes sense. Yeah.
That person, you know, having like a uniquely like, not just American, like being born in America, but like being part of a culture that only exists in America. But I don't know, it's strange because, and again, maybe this kind of gets to what you were saying about the one guy, you know, talking about Gertrude Stein reclining on her silk couch and
smoking hashish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, there's this way in which, like, yeah, you could only truly be American when you're not in America. You know, there's this way in which, yes, like, being American means, I think, particularly like in the moment Stein is writing, maybe a little less now when America's been like the global hegemon for 60 years.
Right.
You know, to be American was kind of to be free of the baggage of the old world. You know, to not have to deal with like all the petty nonsense of, you know, post-feudal, you know, arrangements, you know, like, again, Ben, you know about the Austro-Hungarian Empire.
Right. Yeah.
A ridiculous society. Yeah. Collapsed under the weight of how silly it was. And World War I, but you know.
It's a real floating world type stuff there. Yeah. So,
but you know, there's this way in which, like, to be American at the time, you know, was to not be that, and to kind of be able to be, you know, at least for white people, you know, I guess I should, you know, put a caveat there, but it's like, you know, I think about, you know, my background, and I'm guessing your background too, but, you know, I'm part German, part Irish, part French. What would it have taken for me to have that admixture of ethnicities had my ancestors stayed in Europe? I think about the insane, like, web of like weird coincidences and like funny things that would have had to happen for like a German guy to end up like stranded in Ireland, and then for like another German guy to get stranded in Ireland, and then a French guy to get stranded there too.
Yeah.
And then all their kids to marry each other, and then for me to come out of there at some point.
Yeah.
You know, and like, so there is like an independence that comes from that, you know, this way in which you kind of don't have to live according to these means, but that only kind of means anything if you're not here.
Yeah. And
if you're here, then you are constrained. But if you're in Europe, you're free.
Well, and, you know, like, what was the Hemingway piece was like how to live in Paris on $5 a day. So like, it was like you could get by wonderfully financially as well. I also think it's relevant that she wrote this when she was still living with her brother. So her brother hadn't moved out yet, and she hadn't met her partner, Alice Toklas, where coincidentally, that's when she writes Tender Buttons, which is like, if this is Cezanne, then she's trying to do Picasso in Tender Buttons. And it's kind of impossible to make sense of. But yeah, like I'm with you there in terms of it really only, the cachet here is really only if you're not in America. And, you know, like one wonders if people would have read 3 Lives if it had been published, you know, in America and not in Europe in the, you know, social circle Stein ran in. So.
Yeah, you know, it's strange, you know, and Gertrude Stein is a fraught figure for a lot of reasons.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I found myself trying to think through that idea of Americanness, because it is clearly so core to how she thinks of herself, how other people thought of her.
Yeah.
You know, there's a Picasso quote where he's like, she wasn't a man or a woman, she was American.
Oh, that's so good.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is also why, like, my brother showed me this YouTube essay, and it was making a good point about AI communication, but he kept insisting that this Gertrude Stein poem that she had written about Picasso didn't mean anything. And I like paused the YouTube video and I turned to my brother and I said, "That's simply not true." And like, yeah, it's like they were friends. Like she was, the reason that she repeats he in that poem is because Picasso had a distinctive laugh, and the laugh was like he like, but it was also like he because it's a man doing this, not a woman. Anyway, like, yeah, like I one, I have not heard that quote about her, but two, one, I love that, and two, it's like, yeah, I feel like some of the stuff that she's doing with gender, I think, isn't immediately apparent, but it's all there. So yeah.
I mean, it feels again kind of this thing where, in this way, maybe because she, I don't want to say transcended gender, but because she did have like this very unique experience of being like a fairly independent woman at a time when that was not common.
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe there's a way in which, like, I don't want to say that gave her context, but I wonder if maybe it gave her, I wonder if she was more aware of her privilege than she lets on.
Well, like that's why I read you that bit where she's like saying like gay men do drugs and like aren't like have a valid claim to their identity like she does. Like it's such an interesting thing. Like at one point you could see her saying that to Hemingway as if like, I need to make Hemingway understand that this is normal, like me and Jokos, but at the same time it's like why is she saying that? Like, I don't know. Again, it's like like you were saying earlier, like they were literally just doing things that no one had done before, like in some ways, like people had done them before, obviously, but like the identity categories were like being formed. So,
you know, I guess to just say one more thing about modernism, again, people really do not understand modernity.
Yeah, right.
I was talking with my brother about this a couple days ago, and the way that, you know, a lot of people clearly think about the past as basically the same as the present, and genuinely do not understand how like fundamentally different human existence is, like within the last like 300 years than it was for the like 7,000 years prior to that.
Right. Yeah. Like the changes were, you know, significant. So
like just the fact that like, yeah, being gay is a thing that's even, you can think of yourself on those terms is new. Read Foucault.
I also am a big fan of like, apparently D.S. Eliot didn't like Gertrude Stein and said that her stuff sounds like the saxophone, which T.S. Eliot get fucked. Also, I love that he also cut out like the sex stuff from Nightwood. Like, really, T.S. Eliot was just meddling in places he had no business being in. But since he was like one of the like the modernist poets at the time, everyone was like, "Oh, Mr. T.S. Eliot, what do you think?" Also, you know, from America too. And he turned himself into a British banker. So
yeah, you know, yeah. I have a lot more respect for Gertrude Stein. At least again on the level of like self mythology or like self construction.
Right, yeah, it's like why would anyone choose to be a British banker?
Yeah, it's like T.S. Eliot, a reactionary.
Yeah.
Like,
but, yeah,
at least in personal style, the poetry can be good, I guess. I'm not a big Eliot head, but yeah, like choosing to become British is backwards looking.
But yeah, just like I'm censoring, you know, Juna Barnes. I'm saying that Stein's stuff sucks. Like you know. Meanwhile, I'm saying here are all my poems about being an Anglican. Like, yeah. So, like, all right.
All right. Do we want to talk about Gentilina?
I mean, we can. I honestly took this kind of as like a postscript. Like it felt like after Melanctha and Anna, it felt like this like person who's just completely reduced to the people that tell her what to do, and then she passes away and dies. And I felt like, and again, it felt like kind of like a like, you know, like a worse, not a worse, but like a more constrained version of the two women we just looked at. So.
Yeah. I don't think that. I mean, I think that maybe this feels like the one that maybe is like the most like socially
Yeah.
real, quote unquote, and that I mean, it's also kind of a reverse romance, I guess, where it's a story that's all about like marriage as like a social institution with very little actual like focus or care for like the emotions of the people involved.
Yeah. They just should do it because they're supposed to.
Yeah. Neither one of them really wants to do it. In fact, the man in the arrangement tries to run away. Yeah.
There are a couple good sentences there. I had one highlighted. Matilda was an overgrown, slow, flabby, blonde, stupid, fat girl, just beginning as a woman, thick in her speech and dull and simple in her mind, and very jealous of all her family and of other girls, and proud that she could have good dresses and new hats and learn music, and hating very badly to have the cousin who was a common servant. So, but yeah, that opening bit, overgrown, slow, flabby, blonde, stupid, fat girl, like that's, oh yeah, that's poetry. So,
damn, Gertrude. Yeah. Don't kill her.
Oh man, another bit in Movable Feast where Hemingway's like, I really like Aldous Huxley, and Stein goes, why do you like Huxley? He's a dead man. So yeah, Stein could really cut one up when she wanted to. So
yeah, man, wow. Aldous Huxley, a dead man.
Also, you know, if you believe the cranks, Huxley being a spy, I find something interesting about that. Just Stein being like, oh, who cares about Huxley? He's a dead man. So,
oh man, yeah. I don't know. I liked the gentle Lena. I think it's in some ways like it's very sad. It's also kind of funny.
Yeah.
In this way.
Yeah.
In a way that like the other two aren't quite as funny. Like there's something, again, it's black comedy, but there's something very funny about her dying at the end, and Gertrude Stein just being like, and her husband was quite happy to have his 3 kids.
Well, also like Lena is like constantly just like fucking up, and it's just like God, Lena, you're so stupid. Like everyone keeps telling that to her.
Amelia Bedelia-esque.
Yeah, like but. And then like, you know, she's constantly described as being dreamy, and like just not knowing what's happening.
Yeah. Again, it feels a little tricky because again, it's like there's the surface level of what's going on, and that's like pretty flat.
Yeah.
And again, I think there's a little deeper layer where it's like, yes, this is about a woman who like is frustrated by the circumstances she finds herself in, and you know, can't find any way to like rebel against her situation, so she dies.
Yeah.
I do think the language in this one isn't quite as interesting.
Well, I have a bit marked because to me, this is more naturalistic than like poetic. So I know you're going to have a baby, Lena, but that's no way for you to be looking. I'm ashamed most to see you come and sit here in my kitchen looking so sloppy and like you never used to, Lena. I never see anybody like you, Lena. Herman is very good to you. You always say so. And he don't treat you bad ever, though you don't deserve to have anybody good to you. You so careless all the time, Lena, letting yourself go like you never had anybody tell you what was the right way you should know how to be looking. No, Lena, I don't see no reason you should let yourself go so and look so untidy, Lena, so I am ashamed to see you sit there looking so ugly, Lena. No, Lena, that ain't no way ever I see a woman make things come out better, letting herself go so every way and crying all the time like if you had real trouble. I never wanted to see you marry Herman Krita, Lena. I knew what you got to stand with that old woman always, and that old man, he's so stingy too, and he don't say things out, but he ain't any better in his heart than his wife with her bad ways. I know that, Lena. I know that don't hardly give you anything enough to eat, Lena. I'm real sorry for you, Lena. You know that, Lena? But that ain't any way to be going around so untimely, Lena, even if you have got all that trouble. That's like one sentence. Like, so.
I mean, when I say the language is less interesting, like, again, that's very much like grading on a curve.
Yeah, yeah, from the length of, like, to me this just feels like really like this is a portion where I went, when was this book written, because like I felt like people write like that now, like Thomas Bernhard writes like that, and and that's not now, but that's like way later than this. So
yeah.
No,
when I say this is less interesting, it's like Gertrude Stein on like a batting an average game is still like better than most people's like all-timers.
But like you can, like, even in that section, like you can hear her get worked up and then come back down. Like she gets like more worked up and she's like, I know, and then it's like, I'm real sorry, and like she like the person is like working themselves up, yelling at poor Lena, who just doesn't know what's going on because she's Amelia Bedelia. So
but it's something where you have, again, like you said earlier, like it's something you have to read deliberately to catch that.
Yeah,
you could easily just scan over it and totally miss the cadence.
Yeah.
Because it is like being written on like an audio level.
And again, like, I can't even imagine how she did this. Like, I don't know her composing method, but it's like, there's no way you'd be able to write some of that in one go. Like, it's so,
Yeah, no, I'm always curious about that. I always like want to know how people write. Because it does tend to be so individual, but people so rarely talk about it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't have like a deeper point there, but Spring Madness.
Gas does have an interesting bit.
I could just say stuff.
You're right. You can just say stuff. Gas does have an interesting bit where he says that one of the only reasons Stein was able to write is because her partner was taking care of life. Like, her partner would like let people in. She would say Stein was working. Like, her partner was kind of like her, not secretary, but like took care of the living while Stein could write, which I think was an interesting observation. So,
I mean, you could say the same about many male authors.
Right.
Why is it remarkable when a woman does it?
Another bit for Movable Feast, Hemingway, it refers to Alice B. Toklas, and all he says about her is that she was frightening. And it's like, okay. Anyway.
I don't know. Maybe we're going to come to a bit of an anticlimax like most of these stories do.
Well, I guess like I guess we could end by saying again, as you were referring to earlier, would you recommend reading 3 Lives by Gertrude Stein?
I mean, okay, like, despite everything I said earlier, I mean, not despite, obviously still keep all that in mind. There's a lot of stuff that is equally or more obnoxious in its social views that you're just like forced to read like in high school.
Yeah.
Like there are so many books that you're told you must read this.
Like Weinsberg.
So, like Weinsberg, Ohio, one of the worst books ever written.
Wait, real quick. Why do you not like Weinsberg? We don't have to get into it, but I want just like the hot take version.
It is part of it is definitely like it was one of the first things I was ever handed in like an English lit class in high school that I just immediately did not like. I mean, I will admit it's been many years since I've read it, and I did have just a pretty knee jerk, like negative reaction to it. But I just think it is dull as dishwater. I don't know. Again, some of this comes down to like my own, like, again, personal, like aesthetic and artistic tastes and judgments. I have so little interest in kind of, oh my God, the drama, like, I don't care about these Midwestern grotesques. Give me real grotesques.
Yeah, I think that's where I'm at, because I think I read it was in like a American Lit seminar in early college, and I remember just thinking like, it's just a bunch of Midwestern grotesques, and that was really all I had. Like that's kind of just it. Like, I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, again, part of it is, again, my knee-jerk loathing for any kind of valorization of the Midwest, even in a kind of bass-ackwards way. But I'm like, don't tell me these boring people are freaks. Show me real freaks.
Or show me a gargoyle, like an actual gargoyle. yeah.
Like, I don't care about these people and their boring, petty little lives. I'm sorry. I just don't. There are actually interesting people who live in the world, and I would much rather be reading about them. Like, there are no shortage of interesting people in the world. It does not have to be Shakespeare. We do not only have to read about, like, kings and heroes.
Right, yeah.
There are genuine freaks in the world. Tell me what's going on with them. Don't talk to me about some boring newspaper writer who has, like, twitchy hands. I don't give a shit.
Oh, yeah, Wing Biddlebaum's hands. Yeah.
And don't fucking name characters things like that.
Poor Wing Biddlebaum.
Like, you cannot give your characters, like, Pinchonian names and then have them be complete nothings.
Also, there's like that one story where that like guy's like, all of my imaginary friends, and then he dates a woman and all of the imaginary friends leave him after the woman leaves him. And that's like the whole story. But...
Yeah, no, I mean, let me put it this way. You put me in a room alone, locked room, alone, with a gun with one bullet. And there are two people in the room with me, and one of them is Sherwood Anderson, and the other one's Hitler. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm gonna line up their heads so that hopefully it goes through both, but I'm making sure I'm taking out Anderson.
Yeah, he's gonna stand in front. Yeah, so well, all right, that's all I wanted was the hot take. So yeah. To your point, there's worse things that you could read, such as Winesburg, Ohio. So
yeah, I mean, also, like, again, this book, short and sweet.
Yeah,
Winesburg, Ohio. There's like 20 fucking stories in that book. Quality over quantity, Mr. Anderson.
That's also why I suggested we read this, because I'm like, it's not that long. There's 3 stories. You can get the Stein dose and not have to read Making of Americans, which is 600, 700 pages. So
yeah, my brain would have melted. I would have died. Just given everything else going on in my life and the world right now. I think if I tried to read The Making of Americans right now, it would kill me.
That's the thing that does it.
Ben, can I share with you some wonderful, just in the spirit of the Spring Madness episode, could I share a couple wonderful snipes at Winesburg, Ohio?
Yes.
From great literary minds of the age.
Yes, please share them with me.
F. Scott Fitzgerald summed up the lesson learned by the book's unsophisticated readers as the fact that, quote, there's a lot of sex around if we only knew it. Apparently, H.P. Lovecraft wrote his short story, Facts Concerning the Late Arthur German and His Family, which, Ben, I don't know if you've read that one. That's the story about a guy discovering that his granddad fucked an ape.
I'll show you, Midwestern grotesque. Yeah.
But H.P. Lovecraft said that he wrote that story after he, quote, had nearly fallen asleep over the tame backstairs gossip of Anderson's Winesburg, Ohio.
Oh, man, tame backstairs gossip is great. So...
Yeah, I feel like those two little anecdotes kind of sum up why I do not like that book.
Also, the fact that he wrote the ape story after reading that, it's just like all right, like, this is yeah.
I mean, I've gone to bat for Lovecraft on the show several times. which again also means I probably should not say too much about Gertrude. You should not judge Gertrude Stein too harshly. But or maybe that maybe not that I shouldn't. Maybe I should, but maybe that I can't. Maybe that I'm not allowed to structurally. But see, that's what I mean. That's a story about a freak.
Yeah.
Show me the freaks.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that I think at some point Stein just kind of leaves this like character stuff behind. Like at some point she's just like, what if I just did language itself? Yeah. And I think that's kind of what her later stuff ends up being. And so like, I think, yeah, content wise, I agree with John. You could do far worse. And content wise, if you feel like you want to look at something that is going to like make you reconsider what prose can do, I think it's worth doing, which is, I think, what most modernism wants to do. I also feel though that I'm not quite up to the task. I feel like it's not the work, it's me. And I feel like I might need to reread this again at some point or just read more of Stein. I have a nice compendium of her stuff that I pulled some quotes from for this episode, and I'll probably just start reading bits of that at a time because I do feel like she's changed so much that it's like, where do you even start? And like Tender Buttons is like crazy. Like the crazy thing about Tender Buttons, John, is you know how in Picasso there'll be like a picture of like a still life, but it's secretly a lady.
Yeah. Imagine
sentences that do that. Where it's a single sentence and it sounds like nonsense, but secretly it's about how like if you have sex with a man, you'll die. Like,
I mean, that's
yeah. And like also to your point about identity, that's how she was able to write about her identity with Alice B. Toklas by doing Picasso to sentences, basically. So.
Yeah, you know, as much as I love modernism, there definitely again is a level on which that is the logical conclusion at a certain point is you just leave behind storytelling in any level. Like you've just exited like genre in the broadest sense possible.
Yeah,
like it is no longer it is no longer even either poetry or prose. It is neither fish nor fowl. It is neither Jew nor Greek. It is what it is.
Yeah, and there's, this is my catchphrase this episode. There's a great Gas essay about it where he spends most of the time just dunking on people who are misinterpreting Tender Buttons. Where he's just like, it's like so-and-so is in a different neck of the woods. It's something he says multiple times. So... But yeah, to reiterate again, I feel like if you're up to the challenge, I think it's worth it. But I feel like with a lot of modernists, I need a running start. So,
yeah. I mean, I will say, great book to read and throw some spring madness.
Oh yeah, definitely. So, yeah. Again, two of the characters go crazy when spring happens. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I also. I don't know. I feel like there's a level on which if I'm looking again at kind of like this modernist like mini season we've just completed the arc of, I definitely think that if I'm recommending one of the two, I'm recommending Dunford's Travels Everywhere.
Yeah.
I think that book is like as interesting as I find Malenkta. I think that what Kelly's doing there, because it's actually what it's purporting to be, like makes it that little bit more interesting, even if maybe it isn't constructed with quite the same level of like insane like craftsman. I mean, it still is, but it definitely isn't quite doing the same thing with like the sentence as a like discrete unit of, I don't even know, like aesthetic content.
Yeah. And I think that's what Stein's doing is like just the sentence. That's yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, don't get me wrong. still amazing sentences. But like there's this way in which like I can look at that and I can see the whole picture in a way that like is much more gratifying than this book, which feels like I'm kind of always being held at a bit of a remove. And then I'm being again reminded that this was written in 1909, and you could just say crazy things.
Well, yeah, I'm like the idea of reading at a sentence level for 100 pages is very hard to sustain. Like, so at least, and I'll cop to that. There was a big Twitter discussion about how it's impossible to read 200, 300 pages a week. And it's like, yeah, try reading 100 pages where you're listening to what each word is doing. Like, so.
Yeah. I mean,
I also feel like I think Kelly wraps some of the modernist stuff in genre quite eloquently or skillfully that I think Stein is just not interested in doing. Or if actually another way to say it would be the genre conventions of this is just entirely left behind. Like the idea that you were writing a naturalist novel about working class people. It's like, that's not what it's like. The parrot in the first story. It's like, who cares about the parrot? I don't know what a parrot does. Like, so.
Yeah. I don't know. It's weird. Cause like, I kind of don't want to be like, oh, the fun one's better. But I don't know. There is definitely something about like, again, maybe this is, I don't want to say cowardly necessarily, but there is something about like, oh, this is being written from like a sensibility that I guess I find more palatable, closer to like my own like politics. I mean, we didn't even get into how Gertrude Stein was like maybe kind of a fascist.
She loved talking to the nice, big, strong soldiers. So she was really into talking about it. She loved lecturing to them. So
yeah, big fan of Marshall Pétain.
Well, yeah. Speaking of modernism being a double-edged sword, anyway. So yeah,
yeah. Maybe another time. But yeah, I think this is absolutely worth reading. Yeah. I think that like as grating as I found the racial stuff, and I am saying this as a white person, it was grating more than it felt like. I don't want to say, obviously it's offensive, but like it wasn't like, it's not like I was reading the Turner Diaries or something like that.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't gross on that level. It was much more kind of like,
right.
Like,
yeah, and then right, and then like immediately when she's writing those Steinian sentences, you're like, why weren't you just doing this the whole time?
Yeah, so why can you just not say this stuff?
Yeah.
Anyway, well. Hope you enjoyed this episode, listeners. I hope you could follow what we were saying at all.
Well, like with Stein, I think we repeated ourselves in such a way that something came through. So like,
yeah, this is a modernist episode.
Yeah, it's not the reality of the subject; it's how we talk about it that matters. So.
Oh man. Well, then you have anything else you want to say about this book or anything else?
Thanks for going on this journey with me, because I feel like I said, I start rattling my cage every so often, and I think it was worth it to do this, but it was also, it's a tall ask, so I appreciate it. So.
Well, I guess we'll see what we end up doing next year, because this did feel like a heavier lift than Spring and All.
That's true. Yeah.
That's really in a bad way. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe we'll end up talking about Pound next year.
Oh yeah, we got to do that.
My tummy hurts just thinking about it.
Maybe we'll read one or two of the longer Pound poems, and then that's something like that. Or we can read when he's like, you can understand Chinese just by looking at it. So. Oh God. Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah.
I am just thinking about Gertrude Stein giving him
A tiny chair to sit in so that he falls.
Yeah, yeah. And it's very funny too, because like Ezra Pound was like a twiggy little man from what I remember. Like,
so they must have given him just a really uncomfortable chair, and then he like breaks the chair, and then Stein's like, like yeah, like
look at Ezra the oaf.
Yeah,
bumbling around.
Yeah, just making fun of him in front of all the high society people, so that you can say like, "Oh, that guy's not as smart as me." Like, yeah, yeah. Because Hemingway is like, if you bring up Joyce twice, you're not invited back. It's like two generals, and you're only allowed to talk about when the other general is defeated. So.
Well, we'll be back in 2 weeks as usual. We're going to be talking about Chinese English Dictionary for Lovers.
Oh yeah, it'll be great.
That's going to be fun. So come back in 2 weeks. Until then, I have a John. I can't even come up with a joke right now.
I've been Ben.
Semper Books.
Semper Books.
Thank you for listening to The Infinite Library. If you liked our show, we hope you'll subscribe and leave us a review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or the podcast app of your choice. It helps us a lot. If you want to follow us on social media, we can be found on Twitter, Instagram, and Blue Sky at Infinite Library Pod. If you'd like to contact our team directly with episode ideas or feedback, email us at infinitelibrarypod@gmail.com. Our intro music is by Amos Legend in the Forest of Mayhem. Our outro music is by DJ Daggy Diggs, and our logo was created by Lars Noir.